Welcome to Esoteric Lectures. Welcome to another episode. I'm Element.
And I am Johnny Midnight.
And today we're going to be talking about ushering in the Lilithian Age 2.0. We covered, over the last few hangouts, we covered Lilith. We covered the reason we believe so is the reason why we have this big dichotomy of the male and the female. Again, goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Basically, Jehovah, who is part of the demiurge, did not like Adam's decision with not being with Lilith, the first wife, and so there's this big family feud that happened. And today we're going to surmise that up with, I think, kind of closing the section on the Lilithian story that we've been talking about with this podcast today. And so today we have some very interesting things lined up to discuss for you guys today. So let's go into our first topic here today, which what we have called is cyber sodomy. And cyber sodomy is interesting. Sodomy in general is basically the invasion of the mind and the body. And sodomy is obviously the act of sodomization. And when they do this, basically their minds, the people's minds that participate in this, get fused into legion, which operates under a hive system. It is a hive system of demonic entities. The mind fractures into fractals. Multiple personality problems ensue. The people's minds basically get tied into this thing. So we're going to go into the cyber. We're also going to talk about that, but we're also going to go into the cyber aspect to our society now with transhumanism, microchipping, and all the various different things of the alike that all tie into under the branch of cyber sodomy. It's all part of the same thing. So, Johnny, where do you want to start with that?
Well, I think that we have to talk about, as a bit of a recap, why this is happening, why this process is going on. And I think that in many ways, as I had spoken about last episode and hinted about in our first episode, there had been an invasion or a planned invasion of the realm of the demiurge. You may also know him as Jehovah, Yahweh, or Yaldabaoth. In 1945. Because of that planned invasion, Adam's will, as we had examined in the last episode, was had to be suffer consequences. They lost, and we as human beings, as human men, had lost that intended battle, that intended invasion, and as a result, we are now in, like I said, detention before. We are being punished. And right now, as far as we know, there's very little ways to stop it, because that punishment involves exploitation with not just our society and our economy, but our technology. What do you say about that element?
You're right on point with it. And this goes into what we now discuss with cyber sodomy. We have a society now that basically is ushering in transhumanism with technology, virtual reality goggles, microchipping, implants, you name it, anything to do with transhumanist and its nature of being transhuman is all being pushed now in our society. This is cyber sodomy. The same thing that happens with the act of sodomy in itself is nothing. It's the exact same thing, except on a cybernetic level. Now, the reason why this is happening is because if you are trying to take over something, you want to assimilate it, or at least the way that the demiurge likes to use this technology is the same way. Like the Borg off of Star Trek, they assimilate into something and then it becomes it. It's a cancer. It consumes everything in its path, like a giant tornado, or, you know, however you want to look at it. The transhumanism, you know, they're all pushing the same premise here. Virtual reality goggles, let's start there. You know, they got virtual reality goggles now where games, movies, you name it. It's all to get the person to basically get their mind immersed in something that is not of the actual reality that we're living in now. When sodomy happens, the same thing has occurred. The mind gets tied into legion, which legion is demonic entities. They operate in a hive swarm, basically. Insects are also equated to this in the occult of legion. Insects, wasps, any insect that operates in a hive system, as well as bees in the hive itself.
And ants, yeah.
And ants, exactly. And our society today is very much operating in a hive system already in a lot of respects. Johnny, what do you think? We see the virtual reality goggles. I guess microchipping is a big thing. Why don't you tell people a little bit about that, at least from your, you know, what you know about it, and I'll go into it too.
Microchipping is part of cybernetics. And what is cyber? What does that prefix mean in Greek? It means a fusion, a duality. There has to be a counteraction to the human form and the human status to create a rift in that barrier between our prime material reality and what is known as the Heil. The Heil is the home of the demiurge. There has to be a direct contact. And why suddenly is there a direct contact being made? Well, because Adam's will had become too strong. And the only way to combat human will is through making it very much like the bees or the ants, where free will is no longer allowed. It structurally is no longer an entity or a factor of our species. Okay, so you see, by stripping the man of his will, we are no longer men. We are Devo. But so seriously, though, we are really devolving. We're evolving into something else, and it's inexorable. There's no way to get around it. That we know of yet. I don't mean to sound hopeless or nihilistic, but I am saying that this is a new phase and a new age in which we're entering.
Yeah, I agree. And all of this technology, you know, just backing up your point, is to bridge that from the veil. Now, the veil is kind of like a wall. It's like a giant force field between the different realities of the Heil or the Pleroma, or now the Heil is hell and the Pleroma is heaven. And
yes,
it's like the veil is the thing that separates us from them in a just like a giant wall. And on the other side of that wall, they have their world, and we have our world. Well, they have to find out a way to get through that barrier. CERN is trying to figure out how to tear that veil.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Come on.
They sure are. And when they tear that veil, they let whatever is on the other side of that thing. And I think that that veil is, we have our reality, and this is a whole nother subject, you know, discussing the levels of realities. You have this world, the Heil, the Pleroma, whatever. But they're trying to figure out how to tear that veil, because whatever's on the other side of that veil, which I think is where the next adjacent reality or world or place, is Heil above this one, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, according to my knowledge, that's exactly what we're separated against. So, prime material reality is called the corposa, or corporeal reality. That's what we, not just in this universe, but throughout the many, many, many multiverses that are being created. And they're currently being created.
Yeah,
like notes in a symphony.
exactly. Yeah. I forgot we need to talk about that. You know, it's when you have a wave, like if you drop a rock in water, it creates waves that go out until they stop. Well, that's the same thing. It's a vibrational energy that is, you know, Johnny, you coined it, an orchestra, you know,
Yeah.
and that note or that tone that goes throughout the universe or the reality, however you want to look at it, are creating the different multi-universes, you know.
Right.
It's
Like
ongoing.
for instance, in this universe that in which we live, in which we exist, is, I think, was generated in B flat, and then there's another one next to us that might be in major E. Okay, so, or a major G or whatever have you. I'm not a musicologist, but still, I mean, what I'm saying is, it's these big bangs, if you will, are being generated, and they continue to be as a type of sonic symphony in various frequencies.
Another thing that was that you mentioned was, it's funny, you mentioned B flat, and you mentioned how our reality is potentially generated via the frequency of B flat. Well, that brings into the Big Bang, which is where we believe that that's where this all originated from.
Well, yeah, for us, there are other, like I said, there's other universes in the multiverse that are generated in other tones. So you can't have an entire song written totally in B flat, and that's not what's happening here either. I feel though that we're getting back to our first discussion in some ways, but for some reason within this universe, and we as humans, and on probably many other galaxies and solar systems, had this situation in which we were created in a certain form, and that was the age of Lilith, in which men and women were kind of fused together. Adam and Lilith had, in summation, they had differences, and Adam, for some reason, was the loudest and proudest of it, and said, "I want to get away from that. I get this woman off of me. I want something else." And henceforth, the demiurge said, "Okay, well, you have free will. I'm going to give you a different mate, and her name is Eve." And from there on, for thousands of years, humanity was, the human male was coupled with the human female in the form of Eve. After 1945, when the invasion of the Hyal had happened, or the planned invasion had happened and failed, we were punished by going back to basics. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah,
and now tonight we're going to talk about what's going to happen in the future, and what's happening right now, and what we can expect.
And here's and that's a perfect segue into the next topic, which we're going to talk about Morgellons. But the whole point is that cyber sodomy and all the other topics on things like Morgellons and microchipping and all these other various different things, all under the same subject of cyber sodomy, because Jehovah wants to reclaim the false magic kingdom, which is our reality, basically. And I think the way that that's going to be achieved is via cyber sodomy, transhumanism, and things like microchipping, which has been come to known in biblical texts as the mark of the beast. Because you reclaim control over something by putting a tag on it, like a cow or like a cattle.
Okay.
So,
sure.
That is a way of looking at it, I think, on that. And that's, that cyber sodomy is to basically reclaim, I think in a lot of ways, reclaim peoples from going too far astray from the beaten path of what I think the demiurge wants to achieve. So they're going to...
It's to curb the free will. And
exactly.
Let's talk about Morgellons disease. Now, Element, go ahead and break it down. What is Morgellons to those who are not initiated?
Well, Morgellons disease, in my opinion, is basically a bioweapon. Morgellons is these little fibers. Now, Morgellons disease is a condition that people have where they basically see little fibers coming out of wounds in their skin, and they basically have, it's like an autoimmune disease in a lot of ways. What I believe it is a bioweapon. When you look at Morgellons, you have little fibers, and inside those fibers, it looks like there's black goo inside the fibers. Black goo has been talked about amongst a lot of researchers in this field, of it being a makeup of some sort of artificial intelligence in nature. And the chemtrails specifically have been noted that they have seen this in the chemtrails that they're spraying.
Yeah,
and,
which is basically a vector by which the Morgellons disease is spread.
Right. And this is, again, cyber sodomy, because the patients that have had this disease, it affects their minds. They hallucinate. They see things that aren't there, and they witness strange events. They hallucinate. They see things that aren't there. It affects their mind. Because going back to your point earlier there, Johnny, with Adam's free will, the free will of humanity. Well, the free will has to do with the mind because it is a decision. So what better way to control that than by getting into the mind by this? So Morgellons is this disease, and I believe it is a wetware bioweapon. And wetware,
I was going to say that exactly. Wetware, exactly. It's like a very primitive version of wetware that it's going to develop in the future. Anybody listening to this, you're actually going to want to buy wetware for your head in the future, in order to live out a certain fantasy of love or fortune or success, or to learn a new language. It doesn't matter. You'll be able to implant yourself with this developed Morgellon device, basically, in order to become attuned with life beyond the veil. And even though we could say a different dimension, it still is a form of life, right?
Right. And we talked about this before, that the demiurge uses artificial intelligence as an interface, and that's what wetware is. Wetware is basically the mending with, I think, biological, something of a biological nature with a technological nature. So it's wetware, right, meaning it's wetwaring the system in with something else. It's mending it together.
Well, right, exactly. And that's where the cybernetics come in. You're fusing one type of entity with another. So we have the organic, and then we have the inorganic. The living and the unliving are now being fused together in order to make contact beyond this veil.
Excellent point. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Yes, that's exactly it. The living and the unliving are being fused together to tie between those who are on the other side of the veil and the ones that are in this one, hence tearing the veil. And they're using artificial intelligence to do that. And that's why microchipping is coming into play. That's why transhumanism is now being a thing. And
transsexualism too.
And transsexual. It's funny because all those words use the word trans, because it's like It's
well, because you have to transverse the veil. So
yeah.
it's not just happening locally, it's happening globally. And it's not just happening globally, it's happening universally. And that's exactly what the plan is. There has to be this type of design that must be implemented. And it's happening very quickly, and it's so funny. You'll have people like Mark Dice and Alex Jones and many other awake and aware, quote unquote, pundits that are saying things like, "Oh, these globalists are so dumb. They think we're stupid and that we're not awake and aware." Okay, maybe we're awake and aware, but then what are you going to do about it? You know, it's like I was talking to Element earlier today in the green room. You know that Billy Mahoney, the school bully, is going to beat your ass in on the Hill at 4 p.m. after school. He said it. He declared it. The whole school knows. But just because you know that Billy Mahoney is going to fight you, does that mean you're going to win? Well,
Yeah, it doesn't change the conflict. You know, it doesn't mean that just because you know, it doesn't mean that you're going to avoid the physical confrontation. That's the same thing with what the Demiurge and our conflict with them in this Adam's will Lilithian age is all about in a lot of ways, and what it is. Period. But Morgellons, you know, going back to Morgellons, you know, this is just another thing that the Demiurge and the powers that be that run this reality are using to get people to be cyber sodomized and fused into what is on the other side of the veil with the Demiurge, and to eliminate their free will by their minds, which is what sodomy does. It invades the mind. And they're doing this with Morgellons, they're doing this with microchipping, and they're doing this with implants and transhumanism. And Johnny, you put it perfectly, to what is it, way that you put it? To
transverse, to cross over.
The veil. Yeah. That was perfect there. And also what you mentioned with the living and the non-living are now being mended via on the other side of the veil. They're being put together, or they're transfused. And I thought that was, you know, we'll have to, you know, that's a great point there. But Morgellons is, you know, they've found this stuff in the chemtrails. I'm sure it's everywhere else. But these are all biological weapons that are being used to get people's minds to be tied into the system on the other side of the veil. Now, you know, this is an interesting thing because, and you know, we'll discuss this here in just a minute or two here, but we'll discuss the future of this, you know, after we're done with this. But we're also going to discuss the consequences of what this will be. But think about it. You know, we have microchipping. You know, just like look at the implications of such things is so insane. And another thing is that these devices can be remotely controlled anywhere, and we'll get into that with the subject of consequences. But Morgellons is all, looking at the patients again, their minds are completely confused. Their minds look like they're gone, because this is what sodomistic things do to people's minds. It is basically hacking their brain, essentially.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at that. They're infusing these microfibers, which are unliving, inorganic fibers, into their brains and their bodies. And these are the people that are afflicted with it. What happens to them? Well, they become compliant, they become susceptible. And when this does happen to people who are afflicted with a disease like Morgellons, it's almost like a test run, I guess, for what we have coming up within the next 20 to 40 years.
Yeah, they're experimenting to see how well it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, you know, can the human mind or the human biostasis withstand invasion of the unliving? Can I make a zombie, basically? Yeah, no, I'm not joking, Element. I mean, this is
I laughed
the
because
creation of the undead.
yeah, I laughed because there was a movie actually that came out, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was all about taking a dead body of a girl and seeing if they could resurrect them. And I think that in 1945, they were also trying to experiment with experiments such as could they take people who were in certain conflicts and resurrect them to reuse them. And, this is where it's funny because now you have all the games and the movies. You remember talking about zombies,
Okay.
and so that's, it's just funny how that is all kind of came about as well.
Well, I mean, look at people like, we'll have to do a whole show on this chick, Maria Orsic. 1923, some girl from Zagreb, beautiful woman, was a medium, and she was trying to contact Aldebaran, which is the gateway to the Heil, from the prime material reality. And back in, I think it was 2011, they found her on a podcast.
Really?
Yeah, and she didn't look a day older. And this was
Wow.
the same woman, man. The same woman.
Makes you wonder if she reincarnated, huh?
Yeah, or respawned, sure.
Yeah.
Or if somehow she was preserved. But,
Yeah.
she was somebody that was instrumental into the spacecraft, I guess, or interdimensional craft that the Germans during World War II were trying to invent and conduct. And they did actually produce some of these.
And that's an interesting point there. And if you look at some of those spacecraft, it looks like they have a strange language written on them, which, Johnny, you have come to realize, and I think I as well, that it's Enochian.
Yeah, I think so. And Enochian is actually the language that is spoken and written and used in the Pleroma, which is the language of God Sophia. And
if you watch a movie called Prometheus, there is a specific scene in that movie when the people from the Wayland Corporation go to find the engineer. They find him hooked up to this thing, and it's the first encounter with the alien in the movie. And he is called the Engineer, and he is part of the Demiurge. He is a Demiurge member, if you could say that.
Or at least, an ambassador. Yeah, sure.
And when they talk to him, he's speaking in this alien language. Well, we believe that's Enochian.
If anybody listening to this does know at least a modicum of Enochian, could you please tell us if he is trying to communicate in that language? Because I don't know it, and Element doesn't either. We're thinking about learning it as best as we can, but
it's a very important. It's a very important language to know, because going back to the craft, these craft that were used by the Vril, they have, I don't know if it's on the craft itself, but there was reports that there was strange writing on them, and that's where
right. And I looked at that. I looked at that script. That was not Nordic. Everybody's like, "Oh, Nazis are all about Nordic languages." That was not Nordic runes. That was something else. And I'm very interested in to see what was on the Vrilian craft and De Glocke, what exactly that script was. Could you please hold on? Take it away, Element.
Yeah. But we believe that, that's what it comes down to, is that this language in itself is like some sort of energetic power. These words are, like Johnny said, the language of the angels. And obviously, when you're using that kind of powerful, language, that there is some sort of element of energy that allows these things to, work. There was a movie. It was a kids movie, actually, called, I think it was called Lost Atlantis or something like that. And there was these group of expeditioners that go to find the people of Atlantis, and when they find them, there were these people there, and they rode on these like little ships or whatever, and on those ships there was writing on them, and the writing was what allowed these ships to be able to move and be able to, for them to be able to interact with them. So going back to what we mentioned with these spacecraft as well as the diglocka, these words have to be used to, you know, power this craft. I think Johnny's back here. Johnny, I was just saying to the people that in the movie Atlantis, these craft were used, you know, in this movie, this kids movie, it was a group of expeditioners that go to find this lost tribe of Atlantis, and they rode on these ships that were powered by these things that were strangely written on them, and that's what allowed these ships to be able to work. And again, what I said was that, you know, this is why we led to the point of the Beldeglocka and these craft with strange writings. It seems to be that whatever occultic language is used, it was used to power these things, because obviously the language of the angels carries a very powerful energetic vibration, because when we speak, it is a
it's
vibration.
all about frequencies, and
Exactly.
those frequencies create those vibrations, and that's what opens up these types of interdimensional portals.
Well, John,
so yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your point, and then I think
I feel that in many ways the key to, and I do mean a musical key to opening up these different types of doors, is via sonic frequency.
Well, that's a great point there. When we look at in biblical text, they say that the angel, I guess it was a fallen angel or some angel, the demons, whatever, opened the key to the bottomless pit.
Right, or you talk about the greater and lesser key of Solomon. This was no, it's not funny, it's real. I mean, it was a song to be sung, and even in the Vanilla Bible, you'll have a book called the Song of Songs, and then in Revelation, which is really scary, this upcoming Antichrist, or at least an anti-Christian age, is saying that there will be no music.
Yeah,
they're taking away our ability. Okay, which Drake is obviously an Drake is obviously an example of this, to make the ability to create beat, tone, melody, and frequency inoperable for us. So I like I said, that's part of the consequences that we're going to talk about. Now, I just thought about that. I mean, will we even be able to, you know, create sonic vibrations in the near future? I don't know. That creeps me out. I didn't even think about that until just now. Ugh.
When you look at it, you think about what kind of music they're putting out. They're putting out this high frequency bass tone music and things like dubstep and all that.
Yeah, and two-step garage and you know, grime, I think it's called. And then, you know, you have this really horrible R&B stuff that is going on throughout our top 40 Billboard hits. I don't really know. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that will even that be allowed? Will that be possible? Maybe we'll be speaking silently through digital means, through cybernetic means.
When you think about Wi-Fi is a signal being,
right.
You know, it's the same principle there. So it makes you wonder, is Wi-Fi the same way? Is it? And it's that's a whole nother thing there. The Ethernet cable is the ether is in the spiritual world. So the same delivery system, I guess, is like what is. They can use this in many different ways. I think. You know, let's go into the subject of what our future. You know, actually, let's switch that up. Let's talk about the consequences, and then we'll go into the future.
Yeah.
Of what this is about. And so, you know, the consequences of such thing, you know, going back to microchipping, the consequences are endless. They can remote control. The biggest question is
They can kill you.
they can kill you. And the thing is, it's not the actual chip inside your body necessarily that you have to worry about, even though that's a big issue, but it's where it's being controlled by. Where is the signal coming from?
Boom, your mind. Right there.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing. I was thinking about this just now when I was talking about how the Book of Revelation said that you would not be able to. There would be no more music. And when I say music, I'm not talking about songs, and I'm not talking about ballads or anything like that. I'm just talking about like the inability to vocally communicate anymore. We might actually start speaking to each other, not telepathically, not purely telepathically, but cybernetically. So we're communicating to each other without our vocal cords, or without a guitar or a piano or any kind of sonic vibration, any kind of virtual attunement. We're going to be talking to each other through impulses that are being emitted through the brain.
That's a good point. Never thought. I have not.
So when we're talking about the future, we're talking about consequences. We won't need microphones anymore to speak to each other. We're going to be speaking to each other through thought impulses that might be conveyed via the cybernetic interfaces. I'm going to think a thought to you, and other people are going to fucking hear it. People whom you don't want knowing this information, they're going to be able to tap into that too. Just like people that we don't want seeing this podcast are probably peeping in on, or will be.
Well, I never even thought of that, because when you look
I didn't either. This is something I learned.
what was interesting is that when you look at Facebook, when you look at the social media sites, they're all situated so that everybody knows everybody's business. So it's like the groundwork is being laid for this system to be put into play. So think about a world that Facebook, you have a bio implant of some sorts, and you have the display being projected in your mind.
Sure.
So when you close your eyes, you can see a computer screen or whatever. Well, when people get sodomized, they hear voices in their heads, which is the demonic element to this.
The archons. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, well, those voices you don't know whether those voices are the people you're talking to, or those are the demonic voices manipulating what you want to do for their own agenda. You see how that could go?
Yeah, sure, exactly. I mean, you could, it's like the, and this is very proto-technological for this kind of situation, catfishing. Where somebody says like, oh yeah, I'm this ripped hunk named Chad, or I'm this hot chick with huge boobs named Trixie. And when you actually do go to meet them, they're complete train wrecks, It's funny too, though. I mean, especially the upcoming generation Z, or the iGeners, would rather speak to each other via the texting, wordlessly, without sound, without frequency. And that's so weird. Like my younger sister likes to talk to me via messenger rather than the telephone. She doesn't like using her mouth or her voice. And I'm fine with that. That's fine. But, at the same time, this kind of vibrational frequency is not happening between us while we're communicating. And the same thing probably goes for people and about your age and younger, because you're a bit younger than me, Element, but that's the way things are going. I'll speak to you with words in text. I will speak to you with pictures. I will speak to you with memes. But I will speak to you soundlessly, without vibration, without frequency. That is really troubling to me. I see that happening in this prediction demonstrated in the Book of Revelation. It's just something that's just like it's kind of coming into it's gelling for me right here as we speak. Like every one of our transmissions and broadcasts that we have, I learned something new, and we always sum that up in our last 10 minutes. And, I think that's one of the things for me that I'll get into later. But But now let's talk about, we're 20 minutes out. So what about tomorrow? What's going to happen to human beings in a Lilith 2.0? What can we expect, man?
Well, it's I think what we're really going to we're really going to see a lot of this transhumanistic stuff. It's funny because Taylor Swift came out with a new music video today, and it was called Cyborg or something like that. And she's an androgynous being, and she's a transhumanistic thing.
Of course.
So, we're going to see a lot of microchipping, I believe. We're going to see a lot of augmentations, just like the game, if anybody has played it, called Deus Ex, where this guy is completely augmented and he lives in a society, very dystopian, where everything is controlled. And he has biological implants in his body, and he's augmented. I think in the Lilithian age, we'll see the same thing, because it's all going back to our point of the podcast of why we did this Lilithian series, is because Adam's will was too strong. So because Adam's will, his mindset, however you want to look at it, was too strong, it has to be reclaimed somehow. Well, how other better way to do that than by cyber means? And so in a Lilithian age run by Lilith, I think that is I believe that's one of the biggest ways that they'll do it. And we see it happening all the time. And you brought up an excellent point with the way that we're now speaking via text messages or messenger. I mean, it's insane to think about it, because you can't even talk to people now, and they'll go, "Hey, why don't you call me on the phone?" People have anxiety to actually speak to people on the phone.
I know, right? Exactly.
So, I mean, how much more?
It's almost like an intrusion. And then, for instance, a man and a woman speaking on the street in person is, in some jurisdictions, becoming possibly illegal.
Right. Yeah. And another movie that surmises this is a movie with starring Bruce Willis called Surrogates, where
I remember that.
Yeah, the people had cybernetic bodies that they controlled from their homes. They went to work in them, and this will be possible if such cyber sodomistic implications are taken in our society in a Lilithian age, because if your mind is connected in with an artificial intelligence system, you can transfer your consciousness to that other system if the technology is advanced enough, which at this point in time, I know it sounds like that it's not possible, but it is. Because the whole premise of sodomy and how Legion and the Demiurge operates is by invading someone's mind and then going from mind to mind, like I mentioned before, like off of the Star Trek The Borg, how they're able to read each other's thoughts. The same schematic, if you will, the layout is possible with all that same means. So, but going back to what you said there, Johnny, I believe that we are going to see an androgynous, cybernetic, transhuman world run by computers, and it will be what people will have in their bodies. They're already pushing it now. What do you think? I mean, what else do you see going on with it?
I fully agree. I'm going to take it to a different direction or a different possibility. But a lot of people watching this show might actually say to themselves, no, the shit's going to hit the fan. We're all going to be like Mad Max. We're going to eat cat food out of rusty tins. Arrgh! No, it's going to be ultra civilized. It's going to be so civilized you cannot walk out your house without signing a form in triplicate with your blood. Okay, there isn't going to be a lack of structure. There's going to be too much structure, and not only that, eventually, maybe it might be 100 years from now or 200 years from now, we might not even need that cybernetic fusion. We might have it become completely biological, to where our biologies have been transformed into something that we can't even fathom right now. Or we might be completely technological. We might be human consciousnesses trapped inside this sort of meld of technological, unliving matter. Kind of like at the end of the movie AI, where there's these androids that are controlling this frozen Earth. So I think that it will develop into one of those ways.
Yeah, I mean, the whole term of SHTF, I want to bring a perspective into this because
Sure.
I have, been in the same position, and I do believe in in having preparations, because even if nothing happens, you can still use it. So, but I mentioned this to Johnny. I said, if you are trying to harvest something, if you're trying to maintain a certain state, because the state that you're maintaining is allowing you to withdraw benefits from it, energy,
Mhm.
whatever, you don't want to destroy that. It's like if you're planting corn or you're trying to crop a field, you don't destroy the whole field because half of it is dead. You
Right.
salvage what you can. And so when we speak of SHTF, a different perspective of looking at it. I don't think that, and Johnny hit it right on the head there. We're going to live in an ultra civilized society where everything is so perfectly controlled that, there can't be room for error. And so in SHTF, is the whole premise of the argument of SHTF is that our
Yeah,
society
total
will collapse.
anarchy. Right, exactly. It's a free for all, and there's going to be neighbor shooting neighbor, and you can't even trust your brother, and humans eating each other and stuff like that. No, it's not going to happen that way. You're going to enjoy or not enjoy a future where the individual entity as a person is not going to be able to operate daily without a planned regimen. It is truly going to be Plandopolis for every town, every village, every city. And there's not going to be any way to escape it because it's going to be worldwide.
Yeah.
I really foresee that more so than the Road Warrior. So,
I mean, they didn't plan all this stuff just to destroy it.
no, of course not. You don't want to get rid of this stuff. You want to keep this stuff, and you want to develop this stuff. The only thing you want to get rid of are, anything that would be a deterrent to that. And this is exactly what I think is going to happen. There are many people within our circles that are saying that, oh yeah, society's collapsed. will collapse. There's nothing I can do about it. There's not enough money. Fuck the money. The money doesn't mean anything. The money is just digital numbers scrolling the Folgeston, and we can keep making that. They will find ways to make this continue and develop even further. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen within the next 100 years.
Well, I think on a final note, before we surmise what we've learned today, another way of looking at, when people say, it's collapsing, well, yeah, it is collapsing, but the society, they're bringing order out of chaos. They are collapsing because they're collapsing the old system. They're not collapsing the whole entire freaking thing. They're getting rid of the old so that they can rebuild the new. That is, I think, a better definition of a civilization collapse, but not in the
There you go.
of that.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
It's simply the destruction of the old so that they can bring in this new. So with that being said, why don't we talk about some things we learned today?
Okay, well, I'll start that off today. Right while we were speaking, I was thinking about the Book of Revelations and the fact that we will no longer be able to speak or communicate via sound. That means through our voices, through our instruments, through our music, digitally, whatever have you, we are going to expect to speak completely in a digital format without sound. I don't necessarily mean it'll be through typing. We might actually think our words and transmit them through some sort of vector through that. That technology is being worked upon, but it might be just the way people contact each other in the future. And I do feel that's predictable via that book. I do see that mode of communication happening within the next 100 years on a daily, as the way things are normally communicated via. We're essentially going to be silenced. Okay, that's the way I look at it. So,
yeah. Well, I agree. I learned, I learned that too today. That was something I hadn't even thought about, was the connection that people are now, the social media sites, as well as people speaking via text messaging, and they're not actually using their voices to communicate. That's another way of control. We see manipulation of language all the time, especially with terminologies like LOL and things like that. That's just rewriting language, like off of 1984, so that the ability for people to communicate is altered or manipulated. But also, going back to my point about SHTF, it is the destruction of the old to usher in the new, and the new will be a means of communicating via cybernetic technologies. The big thing is, because it's cyber sodomy, as we've mentioned previous in the Hangout today, you don't know whether that voice is your own or somebody else's that you think, or it's actually being controlled by the actual system run, we believe, by these demonic demiurge things. And that is a big consequence that will happen, but it is what we believe coming into this new age of the Lilithian age is what we believe we'll see. And I think what we've kind of surmised with the Lilithian series is that we have broken down the best of our ability that what we believe what went on and why there's this conflict between men and women because of Adam's will. He and Jehovah did not agree on the subject matter that they wanted him to have, and so he's going to reclaim that will, and he's going to do it, I think, by cybernetic means, which is why. And Johnny, I learned this also as well. The transfix, or I keep forgetting the way you put it there.
Transversal.
Transverse the veil, and to bring the living and the non-living together. The non-living are the means of the technological cybernetic means, and the living are us.
Right, and we're not just going to be operating a machine like we've been doing for hundreds of years. We're actually going to be fused with that non-living, that unliving entity. So, in a nutshell, we're going to have to learn to adapt to a type of new phase of being. And I'll tell you what, if anybody out here listening, we're going to dissect this book called the Codex Seraphinianus, which was published in 1981 in a completely alien language. And it's basically what we believe, or we suspect, we don't believe anything here, we do suspect, though, is a blueprint of what a future Lilithian age is going to be like. And we'll put up a lot of visuals and a lot of the illustrations, everything like that, in our next segment. It's probably going to be about 3 episodes, don't you think?
I think so.
It's a big book. Yeah, it's a big book. Yeah. But it's really important for anybody interested in this show to take a look at, because we're trying to make sense of it as well. And every show that we have, we don't leave you with a final answer. We're probably going to leave you with more questions than anything, because I have a lot now.
Yeah, me
just
too.
after being here for 1 hour. We're true students, okay? We're not pupils. We're students, and we're trying to study what life's all about, where it went, where it is now, and where it's going. And that's what we hope you take from this too. What do you think?
I think that's great. You know, I think you hit it right on the head. Well, I think I have nothing else to say, and we'll close out the show today. Is there anything else you want to bring up? Because I think we've discussed everything I could think of.
No, I want everybody to who's listening in to have a great night, have a good midnight, and Halloween's coming up. So as we say in Gaelic, Icha Samhain. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll see you later. Until the next episode, have a good one.